Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of All Nighter Discussions. This is your host, Gabe Tice, and we are joined by a newcomer. Please introduce yourself, Stephen.
Hi, I'm Stephen Tronicek, and I'm a screenwriter and director and film critic. And I'm just excited to talk about the film that we're talking about tonight because I love this film, and I know a lot of people don't know too much about it.
Yeah, so a little background on me and Stephen. We're both in the same program, Roadmap Writers, to any emerging screenwriters. So far, I think I speak for both of us when I say it's been a great resource,
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's
extremely
been
insightful. Yeah.
I've learned so much about the specific parameters and specific it's so much about you kind of need somebody to tell you the rules because nobody's going to tell you the rules.
Yeah.
And Roadmap's just been really constructive about that. Yeah.
And there are rules. Don't get it twisted. There
So
are,
many.
yeah.
Yeah.
Just in our first class, I feel like I learned all of these kind of earth-shattering things that I'd been. Yeah, I also learned how many mistakes I'd been making. So, and now I'm acting like Roadmaps is sponsoring us. They're not, but this is just a very earnest recommendation from both of us.
Hmm.
But
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
but you and I, Stephen, are in the same program. Instantly, I think we recognize that we both share an enthusiasm for, let's say, cult films, or at least films with a very niche but enthusiastic appeal.
Hmm.
And
Definitely.
yeah, I thought right away that you'd be a perfect guest for the podcast. So I asked if there was a film you wanted to talk about, and you readily said that you wanted to talk about Before We Vanish. Now,
Yep.
why don't you go ahead and tell me and the audience why you wanted to discuss this film so much?
Well, Before We Vanish is a film from 2017, directed by Kiyoshi Kurosawa. And it is a fantastic science fiction film that it actually opened at the theater that I was working at around that period of time. And I remember seeing it there. And I don't remember catching on to it as much the first time I saw it there. And I mean, I was standing at the box office most of the time, so I know most people didn't catch on to it, at least where I was. And then a few years later, I revisited it after, kind of delving into Kiyoshi Kurosawa's work. And I suddenly found this really, really, really interesting, full meal of a science fiction film that was talking a lot about late stage capitalism and talking a lot about societal projections and how we kind of interpret all that, and even got down to really getting into some interesting metaphysics, and I was just blown away. And whenever you mentioned let's talk about a movie, you mentioned talking about a film that maybe you hadn't thought of, maybe that you hadn't heard of, and I'm like, well, nobody's thinking about this movie, so let's
You
talk
were
about
right.
this movie.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you were right. I had not heard of this, which now I feel bad about saying because I definitely think this is a movie that deserves to be seen on a much wider scale. But at the time, I had not heard of it. I hadn't even heard of the director, believe it or not.
Hmm.
And this feels kind of shocking to say, but this is actually the first foreign language film that I'm talking about on this podcast. So, and that's definitely a long time coming because some of my favorite movies are foreign language, obviously. But yeah, so we're finally getting to kind of another part of the world, another culture, and we're seeing um, them do this sort of format, this genre of science fiction, but it's also it's very metaphysical, it's very philosophical, it's very violent, it's very
I
whimsical.
love.
Yeah, I mean, as Smash Mouth would say, they don't stop coming and they don't stop coming.
Yeah.
So it's such a complex film that it's hard to know where to even start. But I did do some research, and I actually found that this was based on a play. Were
Hmm.
you aware of that?
Yeah, I was. I don't know how they specifically got to making the film of it. Um, but it isn't a film that seems particularly out of the wheelhouse of
Mhm.
this particular director. Kiyoshi Kurosawa. I you know, I wish I was a little bit more informed on like context of his career, because like I can make some educated guesses about where like the start and how kind of the evolution of style and different, and I can definitely identify some intense thematic like connections
Mhm.
between his work. um but he seems, from what I know of, he seems to have started out directing television in 1989. There's a, well, not specifically that year, but he did a film called Sweet Home for television in 1989, which then got turned into a video game by Shinji Mikami, and then got, well, maybe not specifically by Shinji Mikami, but it became, the video game of Sweet Home became the inspiration for Resident Evil. Um,
Oh wow.
yeah, which is just fascinating to me. And I've seen the Sweet Home film, and it's very interesting because I know, especially once you get back into the 80s and the 90s and before maybe the early 2000s, the deviation between how one would shoot for television and how one would shoot for film is quite different. But that jump from 1989 to whenever you jump to um, his next like big landmark, it seems, Pulse from 2001, which is my favorite of his films. Um, it's it's such a wide shift. Like his style in Sweet Home is very significantly different than the style that's in Pulse. And Before We Vanish is much closer to the Pulse style. It's quite
Mhm.
interesting. But I know that he teaches at a university in Japan. He teaches film in Japan. Ryusuke Hamaguchi, who made Drive My Car, studied under him.
Oh
And
wow.
yeah. Apparently, he asked the class that Hamaguchi was part of to make an adaptation of Solaris, but they don't have the rights to it, so they can't show Hamaguchi's version of Solaris. But I saw some people tweeting about going to the Japanese film school over there and stealing Hamaguchi's Solaris,
So
so
people
we can
make
all
this
watch that.
odyssey. They make this odyssey to Japan just to see
Yep.
his version of Solaris. Well,
Hmm.
much respect for anyone making that journey. Of
I'd
course,
be, I'd love to see that,
that
but
sounds.
you know, I love this guy's work. I watched a ton of it last year, so I can definitely, even if I don't have necessarily the history on the guy himself, I can definitely identify like some thematic ties between that work, because it's really interesting where he goes with a lot of these genre pieces.
Yeah, and it's great because you obviously have been following his career. You can put this movie in the context of his career. I came into it blind. I literally, full disclosure, I had not heard of this movie. I had not heard of him. My first thought was, is he related to Akira Kurosawa? No,
No.
I know now that he's not. But I went into it totally blind. And wow, that was a really rewarding experience. It's like the first time I can say that I saw a movie totally blind, because let's be honest, to give your time and attention to a movie that you know absolutely nothing about, it's harder than it sounds, especially
Hmm.
when you're trying to stay busy with your own projects like you and I are. But obviously on your recommendation, I watched it. And yeah, let's go ahead and dive into it. So I'm gonna do my best to summarize this movie, and you correct me, all right? Because I'm
All
not
right.
sure if I'll do it justice. All right. So in modern day Japan, a wife learns that her husband that had been cheating on her has been declared kind of mentally unstable, been diagnosed with a mental condition. He seems to have total amnesia and does not recall anything about his previous life, and he's constantly asking about basic fundamental concepts like what is it to be a family, what is it to be married. uh, and then in a parallel story, a journalist is investigating the massacre, the bloody, gruesome massacre of this family, and becomes entangled in this conspiracy by two aliens who are about to invade Earth. And they are, how do I put this?
I
They're
love those
agents.
guys.
Yeah, I mean, this like, I can't wait to dive into it. But what you need to know is that these aliens are agents that have been sent to kind of learn and understand human concepts by literally taking those concepts away from us. They literally will put their finger on your head and steal the very concept they want. So, for example, they want to understand freedom. They want to know what freedom is. Boom, they take away your concept of freedom. So now you are a slave that has no idea of what freedom could even mean. I think the way I want to start is by pointing out that this movie kind of does literally what many of these alien invasion movies do figuratively, that being the aliens come down to understand humankind, right? So, what do you think the movie accomplishes, or how do you think it benefits by this, let's say, unique approach?
Well, I mean, that's a huge margin there, because like, so thematically, I think what Kurosawa wants to explore with the film is this idea of what human beings find societally and conceptually normal, and where the deviation between that and like what one would call like almost a metaphysical, like pure emotion would be. Because, you know, the things that these aliens start to steal are often, and intentionally so, societal conceptions of late capitalism, to say the least. Like,
I know you're enthusiastic to talk about this, so let's get this right out of the way, okay? If you're a conservative, if you're some kind of simp for capitalism, this episode
you're
will
not
not
gonna like this.
no.
Yeah.
I mean, first off, I don't really want you listening to this podcast, anyways. Trying to cultivate the right audience, but
Right.
this episode in particular, it's so funny because I did an episode recently with a mutual friend of ours, Andy Compton. We
Lovely
did that.
man.
Yeah,
Lovely man.
everybody loves
I,
Andy.
I
Yeah,
went to I was in screenwriting classes with A.N.D. That guy's, his screenplays, like, you know, just phenomenal dramas. He's shared a few of them with me. They're just great. I mean, the characters, dude. Characters.
yeah, yeah. I remember reading Suplex for the first time
Mm-hmm.
and emailing Andy and telling him this feels like when I first watched The Last Black Man in San Francisco or Short Term 12, just one of those movies where you can see like somebody
I
with such a,
remember him
yeah,
pitching Suplex in class and giving it, like writing the first few pages or so and stuff like that, and it's just fucking awesome. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I mean, we're both witnesses to history right now.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
basically. But yeah, so at some point, we were talking about LLC Punk, which, obviously it gets political in points. And I made the offhand comment that Republicans listen to podcasts too. So quoting
Whoops.
quoting the great Michael Jordan, but I
You
think
know,
that ship has sailed. Yeah.
yeah, you can't control your audience, and sometimes people are stupid. So what can you do about that?
Yeah. But I personally feel like every terrible thing I see in a movie is a
Mhm.
metaphor for late stage capitalism.
I agree.
I
Very
mean,
often.
especially when it's at all set in the real world, like anything
Mhm.
resembling our reality. So I totally see where you're coming from, but I'd love for you to dive deeper into that analogy
Yeah,
and
yeah.
comment on how this movie kind of does it differently than others, because it is kind of in the zeitgeist, or it is hip to make your movie about the evils of late stage capitalism. But let's talk about how this movie does it differently than others.
Well, I think it is a kind of a there's a level of heart here that I think a lot of comedies and a lot of different films that try to attack, like the acidic nature of all of that, they kind of sink into that acidicness, because it's like, yes, everything sucks and and the pieces that are moving around us are so large that we are never going to ever understand what the fuck is going on. But Before We Vanish is it's very, like, I don't want to say that it's naive. It's just kind of optimistic and simple-minded sometimes about some of these things in a way that like really is well it's well transferenced. It's like what word am I looking for? It's like a lightning rod. There's like a lightning
Mhm.
rod in that main character of the husband who has been taken over by the alien and doesn't know what is going on. Because as he goes on, one of my favorite scenes in the movie, which actually I don't know if I should explain this in too much detail because it might spoil something.
So yeah, for the audience here, right now this is a spoiler-free section, but we will get into spoilers
Mhm.
at a certain point. But yeah, let's save the specifics of that scene. But
All right,
I do
but
agree with you that there's not only an optimism, there's kind of simple seems like a mean word, but I don't mean it
right,
that way. It does see the world in a very black and white concept in the terms of, certain emotions are good and certain ones are
right.
bad. And it's okay to embrace the simplicity of that. Right?
I mean, that's where the film's like real idea of like metaphysics comes in, which is that it it puts a lot of weight on love as a concept. It
Yes.
puts a lot of weight on how humans feel love and how love is such an overwhelming and such a genuinely good force
But also
that
how we can take it for granted, right?
yeah, of course, yeah, yeah. it's it's so interesting because like I mean structurally, if we're to talk about the film, much of the first and second act is about getting the characters to steal specific concepts um, that of human beings that kind of that are enough to progress the story along to the point wherever it becomes a little bit more macro and the government starts getting involved and starts getting scared of these guys because like the motivation of the husband throughout most of the act one is to just figure out what the hell is going on. So he's like tries to figure out family and he tries to figure out possession and he tries to figure out these things. And in turn, of course, because this is a good script, you get to learn about you get to kind of see the outside of the conceptions of family and possession and work and some of these other things, and you see that how gnarly some of this stuff is, just how absolutely demoralizing and demeaning it is. And then um and then the film goes on to contrast that with stuff like goodness and love and how these characters interact with each other, and of course the actions of some of the characters show that too, where you know the younger aliens that are with the reporter are definitely a lot less empathetic over the course of this.
Yeah, yeah. So that dichotomy is really important for me, right? Because I loved the contrast between this very sincere attempt to try and understand humanity, which is, the husband and wife plot,
Mhm.
and this very sinister but very whimsically presented alien invasion movie with these other two aliens and the journalist. Now, these two movies almost feel like separate movies in terms of how I want to discuss them, what
Mhm.
resonates with me about them. But they are tied together by that concept of we're trying to understand these emotions, but one party wants to do it for sinister reasons to take over,
Mhm.
and the other one genuinely has a curiosity.
Well, and it's interesting because the two human characters that could be taken over, they kind of, if we're talking about arcs or so, I again don't want to spoil it, but they kind of end up in the opposite place. And I think of course that's the intention,
Opposite from each
alien.
other.
Yeah,
Mm.
like husband alien ends up in an opposite place than journalist, because journalist does makes a choice that sends him down a rather much darker path or so, and husband does not quite do that.
Yeah.
Like it definitely like is kind of about how you see the about how seeing the endearing human spirit can change you and make you kind of a better person. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's
So
it's kind of sappy, honestly.
I mean, but it's not so what makes it not sappy? So literally I'm writing down notes as I'm watching this movie. And
Mhm.
halfway through I write down this movie seems detached a little. I didn't write the word smug, but I
Right.
could have written smug, like about humanity, treating the human condition as a joke. I mean, one of the funniest lines in the movie is, this journalist, he learns of an alien invasion and he just wants to write a scoop about it.
Right.
And the other aliens are like, "Oh my god, humans are amazing." Like they cannot understand the way we think, and that by the way is like the most realistic thing in the movie to me. But then by the end of it, I'd completely like I scratched that note out. I was like, never mind. This movie is very sincere in
Mhm.
there's a certain type of optimism that is like 99% of the world humanity sucks. You can
Mhm.
complain about that, but if you can drill to the core of who we are as a people, and if
Right.
you can embrace that, then the world will be a much better place.
Right.
um and there
Which
was
is just
something.
so nice. It's just nice. I mean,
It's nice, but it's not bullshitting you, right?
yeah, I need to hear it. I need to hear it every single day because, like,
Yeah.
everything. I mean, I don't want to say that like everything sucks, but it's like shit's hard.
It's
Like,
overwhelming for sure.
it's overwhelming. Yeah.
This movie, and this might be a weird comparison, but it kind of reminded me of like Charlie Chaplin, like kind of like
Yes.
the great dictator Charlie Chaplin. And I have no idea if that's intentional or not.
Hmm.
Obviously, when you watch a movie, the movies you love are gonna come to your mind more than others. And I'm just a Chaplin fan from the outset, but I still saw a connection because Chaplin looked at Hitler, the evils of Hitler, and said, "You know what? If
Right.
I can just punch through this, there is a light behind that, and maybe that light can escape." Of course, World War II. That's a whole history that we can debate on. In this fictional universe, I think there's definitely a statement that the writer and director is making.
Hmm.
Now, speaking of movie comparisons, I thought I was quite clever for pointing out that that the husband widow plot. Oh my God, you're holding it up just to insult me, sir. You're
It
insulting
says
my honor.
Starman on the front of the
Yeah, so
DVD.
I thought I was pretty clever in like realizing, this is kind of like Starman because I consider that a lesser known movie. I honestly don't know how popular it is. Like, have you seen Starman before?
I've seen Starman multiple times, and it's because Starman fucks so hard.
It
That
does. I
final
literally,
sequence. Dun, 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 yeah.
yeah, I made a whole episode on it. Like, I have a whole episode on this podcast devoted to Starman because that movie slaps
Jeff Bridges, man.
so
Jeff
fucking.
Bridges.
And um, minor tangent, but please go watch Starman, y'all.
Yeah, yeah.
Especially if you're a John Carpenter fan. Like,
Hmm.
it's funny, without Starman, I don't think I would think of John Carpenter as highly as I do. Because I think John Carpenter, like Starman, kind of fills out his oeuvre in a way that I think
It's
I
much
want
more human than a lot of his movies.
early. It approaches the concepts of humanity and all these things in
Yeah,
a far different way. Uh,
yeah.
and obviously, he gets to work with an A-list actor like Jeff
Right.
Bridges.
And Karen Allen is just, well, I mean, it's really like the two-hander where they both are
Sure,
working, they
sure.
have to work so hard together to like make that relationship work. And that actually brings me back to the actor and actress in Before We Vanish. Um, I think the actress who's playing the wife in Before We Vanish is really like giving a monumental performance.
Oh
Like,
yes.
especially her final scene is, or her final like engaged scene or so, the climax of her storyline is, I mean, part of that is the fact that there's this wonderful roaming Steadicam, like weird, like kind of twisting up
Mhm,
above the characters in a way that I
mhm.
just love so much. But she like that is a really melodramatic scene, which I'll kind of get into. That I think that him shooting so wide and then allowing the melodrama to come out really helps the film and it's kind of contrasts from some of his other work. But that's a really melodramatic scene, but it's just she just sells the whole thing. It's beautiful.
I mean, I think all the acting is great, but I definitely latched onto her character. I mean, she was
Hmm.
an audience surrogate in a way. She's
Yeah, yeah.
very complex. You know, she's a multi-layered character, and she doesn't respond to things the way you or I might. I mean, when she learns that her husband is an alien, I don't think she responds the way I would in that situation. But she's definitely the most. She's the person who grounds it. You know, she's like the rug in the Big Lebowski. She ties it
Right.
all together, right?
And it does get a little more interesting when we dig deeper and deeper and deeper into some of other Kurosawa's films, because what I really want to bring up is that Before We Vanish is significantly more optimistic than some of his other movies. Because there's a good run between 2001, where Pulse is, and even around to where Before We Vanish, where he is really defined by, or maybe even start in 1997, because that's whenever Cure came out, which is great, great, great film that he made. That is probably his most famous and most influential film, Cure. His films are really about like the nasty ass gray area of
Hmm.
the human condition. Like they're all these like twisty thrillers, like a Retribution and Doppelganger, where it's just like they kind of leave you with this like really gnarly feeling. Like Pulse kind of could end on a positive note a little bit, but it's also suggested that they're never going to escape what's going on in Pulse. Like and that movie's already so difficult that that Before He Vanished feels like almost a rebuttal in a way. It feels like, oh, all of that's meaningless. All of this is meaningless, but it's gonna be fine. Don't worry about it, dude.
This seems like a good time to bring up the aesthetics of the movie. So,
Right,
um,
right.
I counted let's say, the score reminded me of Tim Burton.
I
The
agree. Yeah,
Yeah, the
it
use.
reminded me of John Williams' Close Encounters. Really, like that kind of bounciness. Honestly,
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if that were an inspiration, but I definitely thought of Danny Elfman's
right,
early work
right.
with Tim Burton quite a lot. There was kind of, I don't know what to call it, some kind of carnival-esque, some kind of
Hmm.
boppy, like, I don't know, I always feel like Danny Elfman's scores were laughing at me or something. I don't know. Um, but yeah, definitely a Tim Burton-esque score, and let's say a David Lynchian use of humor. I think this movie's sense of humor is wicked, and this movie's use of one takes started to remind me of, let's say, prime years M. Night Shyamalan. I don't know if you
Yeah,
felt
yeah.
that way.
I can agree with that. I did actually want to bring up the one takes, because I do think he has a particular Kiyoshi Kurosawa's like method. Once you get to that 2000, the 1997, 2001, once you get to that period of time, does seem to like fall into that like very what's been dubbed as like the Spielberg oneer or so,
Mhm.
where there will be a lot of the scenes will play out in a wide master that will transfer from one frame to the next frame to the next frame, and it's about the reveal of information throughout that wide master. I think that if there's one thing that could have defined Kurosawa to me that's a little bit different, is that you mentioned detached,
Mhm.
and while the oneers in Spielberg kind of endear you to his characters, Kurosawa's oneers feel very omniscient, especially in some of
Mhm.
his thrillers, like Pulse. The camera feels very omniscient because the characters are in kind of a helpless situation that they have no understanding of and are falling apart. Or Creepy has a very omniscient feeling camera in
Yeah, and
that way too.
that's why I bring up Shyamalan, because I think in his best movies, that's exactly how he employs his camera. The camera knows things that the characters don't, and the camera
Hmm.
is kind of patiently waiting for these sinister revelations to be made to our characters, and it just it makes for good suspense. Sometimes
Yeah,
it can be a gimmick, but other times it can be a genuinely good way of like building up the suspense, elongating the pace, and kind of waiting for things to snap. Um,
right.
in this movie, so here's another interesting thing. I had the wrong impression of this movie going in because the first thing you see, and you probably know what I'm about to say,
Right, right,
the first thing you see is a bloody massacre, this wonderful
right.
music, this kind of schoolgirl drenched in blood, evil smile. It
Hmm.
feels like, if not something Tarantino would make, something that Tarantino would want to make.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because like the bloody massacre feels a lot like something that he would do in like that 2001 to about that point
Mhm.
range. Like because his films are tough. Like his film Retribution is really acidic and kind of like really like difficult to like grasp and watch sometimes. And one of his more well regarded films, which is Tokyo Sonata, is like as a portrait of like familial abuse and like just absolutely horrifying mundane like bullshit is absolutely like terrifying. um and I have issues with Tokyo Sonata, mainly that I think once we get to like kind of characters here, the way that Kiyoshi Kurosawa kind of treats his women characters has been rather interesting. Still is, but I think Tokyo Sonata has some issues. Certainly, whenever a bandit shows up, but it's that initial murder sequence feels a lot more like something from Creepy or something from Tokyo Sonata or something like Pulse, and then the movie is a lot funnier and a lot more humanistic than some of those other
A lot
movies are.
funnier. It's a lot
Yeah,
more sincere. It's a lot more.
yeah,
It just seems a lot more interested in the actual the
and I'm
psychology of the human condition. What it means to be human. Um,
right. And his most recent film, Wife of a Spy, kind of feels like that too, actually, where it's a little more interested in the messiness, but it's of humanity, but it's a little more optimistic about it. It's a little more warm to it than actively being like, haha, you guys fucking suck.
oh my god, I think I have that somewhere in my notes here. Haha, we fucking suck. I'm sure that's somewhere right here. Um,
I I do want to bring up one shot in the
yeah.
whole movie that
Good.
just leaves me breathless. And well, I mean, I already mentioned the twisty shot over the bed near the end of the film, which that's not really giving too much away because you don't know any context. But there's a shot wherever the journalist is, he's at like a console and he like clicks a console on, and then the camera like really quickly backs up as this black van like pulls in, and it's just such a, it feels so Spielberg like, where you see like the context of the environment suddenly kind of like come in, and you see the van come in, and you see the context of the character come in, and you just feel every single second of it, and it's just
Yeah.
beautiful.
Yeah, I think if there's one shot I were to call out, it would be a shot, let's say in the climax. And without giving anything away, it's a very high octane sequence of the movie that is done in one take, or at least close
It's
to one
it's
take. I didn't literally
it's so
count.
funny. It's so funny.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where everything comes together in this beautiful orchestra of cinema. The acting, the score, the effects work,
Hmm.
and doing it in one take. This is another Shyamalan-esque thing. This is something Shyamalan usually does, kind of unintentionally, but this movie does it correctly. It uses the one take for comedy. It uses it
Right.
kind of
He's
highlight
so
this.
funny in that scene. Like,
Yes, yes, he is. We're talking about the reporter character, I
the
should say,
reporter. Yeah.
because unfortunately I don't have the actor's name in front of me, but I felt like I recognized him. I felt like I definitely recognized him. I'm not sure if that's my brain just kind of jumping to conclusions, but that was the impression I had. He was my favorite performance in the movie, personally. Now, is there anything left to be said about the let's say the aesthetics, the style, the cinematography, etc. of the film?
Absolutely. I mean, the cinematographer, he did a marvelous job with this. They shot an Arri Alexa XT. I'm pretty sure that's true. And they decided to shoot on anamorphic lenses, which I don't want to make broad statements about anamorphic lenses, especially now, but it's like I feel like a lot of filmmakers, especially filmmakers with lower budgets, which then that's not necessarily that this has a lower budget, just they tend to use anamorphic lenses as a bit of a crutch. Um, and they tend to
Shots fired.
not exactly, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to name some specific examples. Shiva baby, but they tend to use anamorphic lenses as a crutch, and they kind of cut around the anamorphic stuff, and it just sure it dirties up the image, but like where's the there isn't an image really. But this is a film that knows how to shoot wide enough on anamorphic lenses that you don't get a whole lot of distortion on the faces, and you don't get a whole lot of distortion on the image itself, and the image looks clean and quite good,
Yeah, it's very
and
clean.
just wonderful. Yeah,
Yeah, no, never at any point was I distracted. Like, my problem with a lot of indie movies is that they just tend to look flat, whether that
yeah.
be a lens choice, lighting choice, the camera package itself. I don't know, but definitely the three-dimensional aspect that you want out of a truly cinematic film, I definitely feel is lacking a lot of these more indie movies that come up on this channel. And that's usually fine because honestly, I'm more of like a screenplay oriented viewer. But that being said, I love to acknowledge when a film that I'm assuming that this movie just didn't have the biggest budget. Like, um, I don't have the number in front of me, but I think it's safe to say that they could have uh, done something cheaper or cheaper looking, but that there was a lot of skill used
Hmm.
to kind of counteract that and really bring this movie to life in a way that a lot of films of similar kind of level of resources just can't.
I do think the Steadicam does a whole lot for that.
Oh, sure.
There's a lot of great Steadicam work in this movie. Just it kind of whips around characters and really reframes things in such a beautiful, kind of startling way. It's there. Once you get into the second act, it's really breathless, I think.
And the action scenes are well choreographed. There's not a whole lot of action, but when it
Mhm.
happens, the movements are very precise. It doesn't waste time with kind of needless. I don't know.
I love I love the entertaining geometry of it. You know,
Yeah,
he'll kind of cut from that this like strange close up to this wide that feels so like geometric in a way. And admittedly, I mean, half the time what's happening in the action is just entertaining enough and satisfying enough. Like it's just this little girl just like shooting guys with a with a submachine gun or so half the time. She like punches through a windshield and it's awesome. And
that's the
she's
part I wanted to highlight. Oh my God.
like VFX, just from a VFX standpoint, it's like you can kind of see how they maybe how they did it. I'm guessing the windshield had some was CGI, but there is like maybe an instance where it looks like it's just like a match cut, where it's like a really quick jump cut where she like punches through the windshield and it's suddenly broken, and it looks great. I mean,
yeah, I didn't question it. Like at no point did my brain register that a special effect took place, which is
mhm.
really the highest compliment you can pay to a shot of VFX.
Same thing with that drone stuff. It's like that's not easy, and they pull it off
Yeah.
magnificently. Yeah.
And this is one of those. Let, I'm sure there's a word for this kind of alien sci-fi movie, but where the let's say the science fiction elements are so grounded or portrayed in such a grounded manner that there aesthetically, there's not a lot of science fiction about its presentation. You know what I mean?
Hmm. Yeah, it's very much like we're living in the real world. We're simply doing that, but all the sci-fi elements are much more um yeah, they're much more, they're in the background. Like there's a handful of things. Like it's like the MacGuffin MacGuffin thing. Hey, look at this communicator. That's the sci-fi element.
Yeah, yeah, basically. I guess the best way to put it is this totally makes sense to me that this was a play, that this was a stage
Hmm.
play. Um, and I'm guessing that they kind of added in some VFX or action sequences after the fact. I'm guessing that the original stage play was really concentrated on these interactions between all of these characters, right?
Hmm.
Um, Now, I really appreciate the fact that they actually went the extra mile to kind of insert these more stylized sequences. I do think it helps the pace of the movie. Um,
And they look great. I
yeah,
mean,
yeah, they look great. I mean, when they're executed great, how can you complain? It doesn't feel dumbed down to me. I think a lot of
hmm.
people would take that mindset. Like, uh, this is where the whole thing of like, what is elevated mean? You know, elevated horror. What does that mean? That you can't have, that you can't kind of indulge in kind of genre elements on screen. That it has to be something more cerebral than that. Like, I'm of the mindset that it's perfectly acceptable for your more philosophical, more ambitious work to include genre elements on screen.
Absolutely. I mean, what are we sitting there for? We want to see some guys get his head blown off. We want to see this one guy get fucked up by a drone. I mean,
Yeah, and the fact
yeah.
that this movie does the balancing act of both satisfying those needs, but then giving us more than we kind of bargained for in a way. I mean, to me, that's what I aspire to as a filmmaker. I don't know about
Hmm.
you, but that's the tightrope I want to walk.
Absolutely. I mean, and I think that very oftentimes those genre elements and the strength that, like the emotional strength that they bring, the emotional sway that they bring, is what allows like a lot of the sincerity to hit. I mean, it's I think that, you look at the work of Brian Usna, you look at the work of David Cronenberg, you look at those guys, and they're swinging for the fences emotionally,
Hmm.
and that's what allow and the concurrence of those genre elements, the concurrence of that melodrama, the concurrence of all that gore, all that, weird science fiction shit, it's all working together to push the film into a much more emotionally realistic space. And here it
Yeah,
works very much the same way.
and just more emotionally explosive, just more fully
Hmm.
realized, right? I mean, especially Cronenberg. It was just his birthday the other day. Um,
I Cronenberg so deeply has influenced my writing that it's not even funny.
yeah, I mean, the only reason I haven't talked about The Fly on this podcast is because it's not a cult classic, it's just a classic. It's just one of the greatest movies of time. Yes. Yes. So hopefully I'll
Yep.
find some menu to properly discuss it. But until then, just know it's one of my absolute favorites. By the way,
Hmm.
since we're kind of, yeah, we're not above plugging stuff. I
Oh
totally
yeah.
recommend Shot Factory's The Fly 5 movie collection. Right?
Oh, it looks, yeah, I'm broke, dude. I can't afford that. But it looks incredible. And at one point I will probably end up picking that up. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I want to highlight that The Fly 2, the sequel to The Fly, it ain't so bad. It ain't that bad.
I I haven't actually seen it. It was directed by the guy who did the VFX, the special effects for the first film, right?
Right. Right. And it's
Right.
Eric Stoltz.
Right. And I would I would probably just watch it just to see the the special effects,
Oh yeah, I think
honestly. Like,
people agree that the effects are great and the best part of the movie.
mhm.
I'm just partial to its kind of more comic book approach, I guess you could say. I don't know. We'll have a whole separate discussion about The Fly too. That's a perfect podcast.
That's a whole other thing. But I mean, to get back to the point with Before We Vanish, I think that there's a playfulness in the genre elements. There's a playfulness in the melodrama that really adds to the emotional integrity of of the story, which is just about an alien realizing what the difference between a societal conception and what a real, true, beautiful human emotion is. And yeah, I mean, that's great.
Yes, yes, because one big thing is, and I just fully realized this during our conversation, but there are many times where a concept is taken from a human in this movie and it
Mhm.
completely benefits them. Or at least, I mean, from
Oh,
my seat.
absolutely.
Yeah, it's your subjective call, but when I see this young man being removed, the concept of possession, he becomes a
Yeah.
Zen-like figure trying to spread
Mhm.
love and charity. Uh, if you don't think that's made his life better, okay, all right. Again, this isn't the podcast for you, but that's how I read it.
I mean, I think that's the whole point of the movie. The fact that I love that scene. That scene is, it makes me feel joy because this guy, he's trying to stop the husband from going inside his house.
Yeah.
And then quite suddenly the husband's like, oh, imagine the concept of your house. And then the husband takes it from the guy, and the guy later in the film is like, I'm great. This is wonderful.
Yes. I
I
mean,
don't
he
feel
really comes out and
attached
says
to
it.
anything.
Yeah.
Like, I love that. I mean, and it's just, I mean, my personal political ideology does of course land more on, I don't like, I lean a lot lefter than a lot of people that I know, and it's because
Because it's
why do we
fun.
need to own shit? Why can't we all just be kind to each other? I mean, there's a
Yeah.
lot of like
I mean,
layers to that, but
you
the
don't even have to take
baseline
it
is
in.
kindness.
Mhm. You don't even have to take it in political terms, right? I mean, I feel like this is
Yeah.
very in line with a Buddhist philosophy, a
Hmm.
Zen philosophy. Obviously, I'm not saying to completely remove politics from it. I think it'd be ridiculous
Right.
to do so, but it's more universal than modern day left versus right politics.
Hmm.
Is what I'm trying to say. But here's the difference, right? Possession, that's a man-made concept. You know,
Right.
humans came up with the idea of possession. But love, that is something far more internal.
Yep. I have it written down in my notes here. Let me think here. I have it written down that they the film very, very like the deviation between a pure emotion and one that might be influenced by societal expectations is the main allegorical crux of the film. That's what I have written down in my notes here.
Hmm.
Because yeah, you're right. The concept of like possession, the concept of the individual self, the concept of work as we see in the film, which I love that work sequence where the boss just goes crazy because he's fucking asshole. But
Yeah.
it's those are all about how we those are all about imposed boundaries, imposed ideas. But I mean, but whenever he encounters love, it turns into a completely different thing.
He's not even
Turns into a
ready for
completely
it.
different thing. He's not even ready for it. Exactly.
Yeah,
He
because it's
tries to find some type of human conception of it at a church. I think that seems hilarious. Where he tries to find. I mean, I don't like. I don't personally ascribe to any religion. My opinion is that like as long as nobody's hurting anybody, I don't mind. I don't care what anybody's doing with their religions. Like people need things to keep going. That's
Mhm.
life. But there is a rather funny scene where the husband, he tries to interpret love through the context of God's love, and he just doesn't really quite get it. Like
Because what is like This is something that growing up religious, I went to Sunday school. I had that experience.
Right, same.
I didn't understand what God's love had anything to do with like real world practical issues of love or of human relations. Uh, and Obviously, this filmmaker feels the same because I think that's exactly what this husband character goes through in that scene. And in the the mark of a good movie when I feel like you mean to talk about it for a certain amount of time, and then you just figure out more and more things to dive into, which is exactly
Hmm.
the experience I'm having with this. It's like, oh, like no stone goes unturned in terms of like the ideas and the message and what the filmmaker was clearly trying to express. But I would be remiss if we didn't talk about the characters, or at least this one character,
Right.
right? This journalist. For me, he kind of represented the dilemma of the movie in terms of humankind, right? What when the chips are down, what are we going to do? How are we going to act?
I think husband alien character and journalist character are two characters that encounter the world, the same story world, and end up on different sides of it. And
Well,
that's what I think is so
yeah,
interesting about them.
yeah.
Because husband character ends up with having internalized the broader metaphysical concepts of human existence, i.e., love, and journalist character decides nihilism, fuck it all. I'm going to do whatever I can to just help these people, help these aliens or so. Like
Yeah.
that's what I find most interesting, that pivotal contrast between the two of them.
And let it be known from henceforth, there are
Yes.
spoilers abound. Spoilers abound.
Spoilers abound, yes.
Yes, but it's inevitable because the ending really shifted so many kind of geometrics in terms of how I viewed this movie and the
Hmm.
relationship I had to the movie. So this journalist character, okay, so he starts out as a representative of the media, right? I don't know what Japanese media is like. If the Japanese people have a similar view to their media as we do here in America, but watching this movie, I thought, yeah, they do because this guy is about the bottom dollar. He's about the scoop. He's not about the facts. He's about his name, the prestige that comes along with whatever. The more catastrophic it is, the bigger the story is. That's how he clearly views it. Um, but he goes through one of the more fascinating character arcs I can think of. So help me out with this, Stephen. So he starts out there, and then
Yeah,
at some yeah.
he starts off as kind of like the like journalist who's like being a little more exploitative. He's obviously driving up on a murder scene that this young woman has been part of. He encounters the younger guy, which, just as a quick note, there's a very funny sign in the back of the scene where he first encounters the younger guy that says "US go home,"
Oh my
which
God,
I
really?
think
I didn't even notice
which I
that.
think has a pretty significant like political aspect
No, I'm
to
sure that's a complete coincidence. Come on, don't read too.
nothing going on with alien invaders, blah blah blah, that type of thing. But he encounters this younger guy. He is matched with an extremely like devastating, you know, a devastating ultimatum, which is that the human race will be destroyed. And his choice is to kind of roll with it to see how far he can get. And I think over the course he definitely like, I'm empathetic towards him because of the camaraderie that he builds with these like strange, weird ass alien guys. But by the end, that camaraderie kind of bleeds into fuck it nihilism, where he's like, I'm just gonna help them, end all of humanity. I'm just gonna grow with this.
Oh boy, so this is where I could talk about this for so long, and
Hmm.
this is where a conversation really benefits, because I was wondering if I was alone in having these questions. So I was amazed at his initial response to this whole premise. He's approached by a young man who says that he's an alien. He wants to invade the Earth. And this journalist gives him the time of day, which
I
already, would he? I don't even know, but I rolled along with it. Fine, it's for
Yeah,
the
roll along with it. Yeah, it's a movie.
but
If it didn't happen, the movie wouldn't happen.
yeah, as John Ford would say, I mean, I'm not one of those like cinema
Right.
types.
Same.
So, but then I start to really question things when he learns that this young man is clearly up to something devious. If he's not an alien, he's still hurting people because
Hmm.
he comes to this young man's home and he sees what he's done to his parents. Um, and
He's
even though he seems bothered in the moment, he never stops talking to this young man as if he's anything less than a friend, a
hmm
companion. Uh, and I bought it. I bought it every step of the way. I don't know.
he's just a selfish bastard. I mean, I can understand like one and like kind of connecting to these two people who are going to get you the best story. And the younger guy tells him at one point down the line, "Hey, look, if you just keep helping me, I'll keep you alive. Don't worry, you're not going to die in the aftermath. It's going to be fine. We have to keep some of you alive." Um,
Yeah. So
which I don't necessarily believe, but
and we never really find that out. It would be
Mhm.
interesting to know exactly where that would have landed. But I think where I arrived is this: that in a world of human deceit, deception, kind of let's just we've all experienced some form of deception when dealing with each other. These aliens are completely transparent. These
Right.
aliens are completely honest. They're
Hmm.
open. They have no shame or no, remorse. I think this journalist operating in the media field is very attracted to that.
I agree. And I think it brings up the question of contrast with the government guys that show up. Um, there's an older actor in this film named Takashi Sasano, who has been in a lot of Kiyoshi Kurosawa films, and he's the head government guy. This like older actor who's kind of short, kind of balding. He's fucking great in everything I've seen him in. And he is very dishonest about everything. He's very sly about it. And I think Sasano hits just a perfect mark with it, where he's so funny about how he's like just very quietly and calmly saying, "It's a virus, don't worry about it. It's an issue with a virus, and we're trying to stop it. And if you just help us out, that'll be good. Here, just take this communicator, don't worry about it. Just and the communicator ends up being a tracker that allows them to find the aliens and everything like that. But it's definitely brings up that theme of the aliens are honest. At least they
They're
they
not only
aren't
are they
being
honest, they're completely disinterested in being anything but honest. You know what I mean?
right.
I mean, because they could lie. I mean, they have plenty of chances to lie, and they don't. And there's a certain smugness, or at least a righteousness, about how honest they are.
Right.
Um, and
They
that's
obviously don't have a problem with fucking with people. Like, there's a great scene where they're fucking with that one detective and they're asking about his conception of individuality, and they've stolen it from him and he literally can't tell them what it is.
yeah, and
But they just keep like
that was the
they
most
just keep
abstract.
smacking him around.
Exactly. No, no, that was the most abstract yet the most violating section of the movie. Like, even though the idea was so hard to grasp, it was still the part that got under my skin the most. Because
Yeah.
to take oneself away from themselves, like what greater crime could there be? And that's I've alluded to this, but I really want to come on and say that this movie features some of the most like awful dare I say, mean-spirited kind of ideas put to screen in terms of how harmful they are in the most fun, whimsical. Um, uh, like I never got offended once. I never like
Well, this scene where they're like fucking with this guy and just knocking him around has like circus music, Danny Elfman music
exactly,
playing behind
exactly.
it, and it is a funny scene because like it's horrifying that they've like stolen this guy's concept of self and are just like beating the shit out of him while he like stumbles around this room. But I mean, it keeps it light. It doesn't ever quite like fall into being like absolutely despairing or anything.
I'm so glad you said that because I literally have a note here. I I get to share this word for word. I said this movie has the lightness and the moral focus of a fable.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
absolutely.
Um, and I wrote that during that scene because that's when the whole concept crystallized to me in terms of not only the raw idea but the director's approach.
Yeah, and you notice a lot in the action and in different moments. I'm gonna bring up a moment where the younger girl who kills her family, she's been possessed by an alien, but she eventually exits the story in a circumstance wherever she is trying to stop the husband and the wife from running away together, and the wife just straight up runs her over with a car.
Which I was very glad to
uh,
see. I was very happy about
and she's like, her response to like the guy, the younger aliens, the other guy kneels down, he's like, hey, do you want to transfer to a body? She's like, oh, screw it, don't worry about it. They're already fucked, don't worry about it. I'm just gonna check out now. I built the controller, you're good.
yeah, these
But
aliens are truly selfless, right? Which means that Ben Shapiro will be calling this an anti-communist movie. That's exactly what that means.
but what I think it works so well about that scene is that the part where she gets hit by the car is just straight up physical comedy. It's not even like it's not like it's realistic and it's disturbing because it's a realistic depiction of somebody getting by a car at like 40 miles per hour, but it's not played like it's the most dour thing in the world. It's kind of like a
Yeah,
comedic beat that she's like, oh fuck it, I'm gonna run in front of the car and just stand there and
well,
see what happens.
yeah. I mean, we have the context to inform us of what's really going on in that scene. I mean, my
Hmm.
brain registers that this young woman is an alien seeking to invade Earth. You know, an alien who's committed terrible crimes against humanity.
Right. She kills like lots of guys.
Lots of
So
guys.
many people get killed.
And here's the interesting question, right? Would you rather be dead, or would you rather be one of these people who have their identity stolen from them? You know,
Hmm. Yeah, I love Body Snatchers stuff, especially 1978's Invasion of the Body Snatchers. That movie fucking rules. But
classic.
uh, if Philip Kaufman, if you pick a movie from like the 80s to the mid 90s, all of them are bangers. But he he's but it is so interesting because it's like it's light, and that lightness adds to almost that creepiness of, oh, these people are just gone. That's what's going on.
Yeah, I think,
And
and the lightness kind of comes from, at least to me, it was like seeing this whole scene from the aliens' perspective. Like
right.
this is the emotions that they're experiencing as they wreak this havoc upon us, right? Um,
And that kind of comes, I think, to an head in the drone sequence, which is a straight up circus music like cavalcade of the journalist who has now been taken over by the alien.
willingly.
He's
Yeah,
willingly,
yeah.
yes. He well, I mean, it starts with the shootout with the government guys, which is just very funny because the aliens just fucking with them the entire time. And like he starts even taunting Sasana's character. He's like just messing with them. And then he lets them shoot him. And then he's just like playing dead. And the guys walk up and he just shoots all of them. And it's a very funny scene, but it leads to the scene where the one guy's trying to distract this drone from destroying the communicator by just having him chase him around this like communication / oil refinery. And this is a one shot. And you brought up Chaplin, and yeah, this guy's just going full on Chaplin. Like
He literally does a limp, a tramp-esque limp at some point. I was like,
he
I
gets
can't
blown up.
imagine.
He gets blown up by a missile and then stands up and starts limping around and just going, "Woo, follow me, it's gonna be fine, don't worry." And
Now
it ends on like this. Yeah.
Yeah. Gosh, if there's one thing I really want to get your opinion on here, Stephen. So this journalist character, he goes through a radical shift. So at some point, he tries to alert the public about the aliens. He literally gets up and shouts, "Hey, these aliens are here. They're trying to invade Earth. Let's do something." And nobody takes him seriously. So he goes from that to willingly giving his body over so that these aliens can commence their invasion of Earth. I want to ask you why that character goes through such a transformation, let's say.
I think it's about deceit, honestly. I think it's that he realizes that one, nobody's listening to him, and two, the government guys are being so shifty about this shit that it's like, why not? These guys suck. Like I think, and I think it's that embrace of nihilism where once you recognize the problems that are around you and how overbearing and how overwhelming those are, I do think there are a lot of people that decide ultimately to be like, I can't do anything about that, and therefore I'm not going to. I'm going to give up. I'm just going to sit on the sidelines and watch this whole fucking charade go down. And I think that's what the journalist ends up doing. On top of that, to be honest, I think you were mentioning the transparency of the aliens. I think there's something about him that's endeared to them still.
Clearly.
Especially at the end. Yeah. Where he realizes that all of it is completely misunderstood. He just can't understand it. He can't understand why people won't listen to him. He can't understand why the husband and wife kind of go down their own path. He can't understand anything. It's like, and he just decides, all right, I'm going to die. You're going to die. Why don't we just die together?
It's like he found a cause that he believed in, finally.
Right.
Yeah.
He found something that he believed in.
And to be honest, another great mark of a movie, a foreign movie, is when it really makes you want to dig into the culture that produced that movie. So I was really curious just what Japan's kind of socio-political scene was after watching this, honestly.
So I don't know enough to really speak intelligently on that, but I do know there's a lot of film theory and a lot of different talk about the elements of post-war Japan.
Sure.
That moment whenever they had to open up they had to open up their markets to Western influence, and how that changed, capital changed everything. But in the context of post-war Japan, one of my film teachers, she framed it within the works of Miyazaki, where he's discussing how people give up their identities in such an easy way, in spirited way. He's discussing how that work culture and that genuinely changed after the devastating effects of the Second World War really changed how people interacted with each other. It changed, you look at Ozu, Tokyo Story, where it's like the parents' generation is kind of disconnected and confused about why their kids are so obsessed with all the material things that they have to get done. And I think that at least in interpretations, like that's been one of the main things that people have centered on, in post-war Japanese cinema. This idea of that older way of life versus that newer way of life, and how those two things interact, and how that newer way of life really just absolutely disconnects people from each other.
So a movie I kept thinking about was Shin Godzilla.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hideki Anno, let's go. Are you excited for Shin Ultraman?
Yeah, anything that director does, I will be excited for. Absolutely.
Evangelion, yeah.
But even just, I mean, yeah, I'm a huge Godzilla fan. Like I can literally reach up right here. Oh, yeah, there it is,
Hell yeah.
right there.
Awesome.
Yeah, I'm in it to win it, baby. When it comes to Godzilla, Shin Godzilla asks you to take this character on the darkest terms, to fully question humanity, in the face of almost absolute annihilation.
Yeah, it's definitely I think it's definitely there's definitely like a theme of specific alienation, and
Mhm.
how, people tend to get bonded to things that they just maybe they don't understand it, but at least it's there, dude. Like,
Yeah.
at least it's like a human, or a human thing that's there with you, and it kind of like helps you keep going, helps you believe at least a little bit. Um,
No, it's absolutely it's so profound in that way, and it really moved me at the end. Again, spoilers, but
mhm.
the scene where this alien, this husband, goes to his wife, who he literally
This is the
stole
best
the
scene of the
concept.
movie.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
if not the best scene, it's the one that truly
Oh,
elevates the movie.
whoops. I thought, yeah, you were talking about the scene where he steals the concept. Um,
Oh, sure. I mean, I think
I,
everything about that relationship, especially past that point, is to me
mhm.
what elevates the movie. So, there's the scene where he actually steals the concept, which is kind of filmed like a love scene.
Right. Well, she tells him earlier in the film, don't ever take love away from a human being, because you will absolutely make somebody just lose themselves if you take love away from them.
Yeah.
And of course, that's a big, big signpost for any screenwriter. Hey, guess what's going to happen later?
But still doesn't happen the way you think it will. I mean,
Right, right. Where it's such a beautiful scene, because it's a very interesting steady cam, almost a steady cam scene. Maybe it's a crane arm, where it's so like enrapturing the way it's kind of twisting around their bodies and twisting over as she like drags him down, and it's like, look, we're all gonna die, and what I want you to do is I want you to take love from me, because I realized now that in bonding with you and being able to kind of, grow with you as the alien person, I actually like love the alien person, if not the human being that was there before. And she's like, steal love from me, because if all of this is going to go to shit, at least you'll know what that is.
a lot of people will equate love, the concept of love, to sacrifice. You have to sacrifice something for that person. The more
Right,
you
right.
sacrifice, the more you really love that person. At least,
Well,
yeah.
I
Go
think
ahead.
it's about, in a way, I think it's almost about willing sacrifice. It's not necessarily, because I think, the wife starts off as a very exasperated character, which this seems like a good point to talk about Kurosawa's relationship with some of his women characters in movies,
Oh,
which is not great. um, I think there are a handful of films that are better than others at this. Pulse is better than, like Tokyo Sonata, which is better than which is not which Creepy is a little bit more empathetic towards the women characters, but Creepy is just so outwardly nihilistic that it's kind of impossible to like think that movie cares for anybody. um, but um but like he tends to run into an issue wherever he tends to explore like the inner manic psychology of his male characters, and very often the female characters are treated at the expense of that. um I think Tokyo Sonata especially runs into that issue. especially where this bandit kidnaps a woman and there's this whole like sexual assault scene that's just like, bro, come on, man. Is that really necessary in all this? And it's but in Before We Vanish, what's interesting is that, and even so, he made a film called To the Ends of the Earth, which is a much more straightforward drama about a young woman, a Japanese reporter, who's traveling around a foreign country with her team, where he's much more focused on like the certain societal exasperations that these women have to actually go through to like just survive, period. Like this woman has to take on her husband, and he's an annoying piece of shit because he's an alien. He doesn't know what's going on. He was obviously horrible to her before, but it's so nice to see as this alien comes to understand human beings that he starts to recognize that it's him willingly acknowledging what she likes and willingly acknowledging like the boundaries that they share as human beings that brings them together. And eventually it leads to her willingly being like, look, at the very least, if all of this is going to end, you should at least know what love is. You should at least know what that is as a concept. And you should take this. Like it feels willing in a way that is really I don't want to say sappy. It's more melodramatic. It's just beautiful to me.
It's too idiosyncratic to be sappy. I mean, it's a risky choice. I mean, you have to acknowledge the fact that this woman, this character we're talking about, clearly likes this alien man more than her real husband, who was
yeah.
At some point, you know, she notices that he's eating her cooking. He's eating her cooking, and she says, "You never liked my cooking." He's like, "Really? Because it's great." And she is the happiest we ever see her in this movie, you know, by far.
He like actually starts to notice, oh, like, yeah, where's that blue shirt? She's like, what the fuck are you talking about? And he's like, we threw that, she says, we threw that away years ago. You didn't like that blue shirt. He said, but I remember from the other guy, because I can see his stored memories or so, that you said it was your favorite shirt of mine. So I just wanted to know, I wanted to make an effort to acknowledge your happiness, acknowledge yourself, and say, hey, where's that blue shirt, so that we can, you know, acknowledge each other, be present with each other. And I mean, I think as that subplot progresses, it's so important that it does feel very genuine that they acknowledge and start to be very present with each other and acknowledge each other's needs in that respect. Like whenever she runs over the one alien with the car, she's like shell-shocked, the wife, because she's just like killed a person, and the husband just looks at her, grabs her hand, and says, look, man, just get out of the car, I'll drive, don't worry about it, just get in the other seat, we're okay.
Which
you know, they're truly there for each other in a way.
That's what some people would call relationship goals. #relationship.
Don't worry about it, I'm there with you to the end, man.
That's what I thought. I mean, you know, because as a viewer, you don't feel sorry or particularly, let's say, emotionally impacted by the fact that this alien invader was run over. You know what I mean?
Right.
That moment.
I feel more impacted by the fact that this guy reached an olive branch out to this other person and recognized that she needed him to drive after she ran over this alien person, and was like, okay, I'll do it. I recognize your feelings, and it's going to be okay. We're going to get through this.
Yes. And that's the moment when I saw the heart of the movie coming to fruition, right? That's when I crossed out my note and I really recognized that the movie was aiming for something much more pro-human than anti-human.
Which the end so intensely hammers in.
Yeah.
Like,
do you want to speak to the end real quick?
Yeah, of course. I mean, so he's obviously stolen love as a concept from her, and then the alien invasion starts, and then it suddenly stops. And part of it is hinted towards, or even pretty much outrightly kind of like big subtext as not subtext, like big super text. Hey, the guy involved, like in absorbing love into the hive mind of these aliens or so, has kind of changed how the aliens want to attack Earth. And at the end of the film, it's very much alluded towards the fact that the people who've had these concepts stolen from them aren't going to have those concepts stolen from them forever. It's going to come back eventually. And it's such a nice ending, honestly.
And that was such an interesting thing for me because I was thinking, what does it mean to steal the concept of love? Like, can you steal somebody's ability to naturally love a person? I in my view, I do not think that's possible. You know,
I
unless
don't
you're
think the
going
movie
to.
thinks so either.
No, the movie clearly doesn't. I mean, if a movie were to portray that, it would be something that did not resonate because you could not relate to it as a
Right.
human being. This movie clearly thinks that you can take that concept away, but it's something that will naturally grow back like a wound, right?
Mm-hmm.
It'll take time, it'll take care and attention, but you're left with a very optimistic note, which you know, to be honest, after so much nihilistic shit, and after it feels like nihilism became part of the zeitgeist post 2020, I cannot tell you how refreshing and how moving an ending like that was. Like, to
I
be
agree.
honest.
I agree. It just leaves you remembering. I like to talk about this concept of radical faith in living.
Mm.
And I like to talk about it in context. I'm going to talk about it in context of the Matrix here for a hot second, because I'm a huge proponent of basically all of the Matrix movies, including the most recent one. And if we talk about radical faith, and I even think about reaction shots and the ways that similar reaction shots made me feel. The ending of this movie, that final shot of the wife, kind of that conception, where you start to see that radical faith of that these things will come back, these wounds will heal, time will be able to move on. It reminds me of this great reaction shot in The Matrix Resurrections, whenever the Jessica Henwick's character, she realizes that Yahya Abdul-Mateen's character is in fact Morpheus, and she just fucking rolls with it. It's like, it doesn't matter. You have to believe that this world is going to be okay to survive in it. And those two reaction shots, they feel like a movie quite suddenly saying everything sucks, but it is through our persistent and constant belief that things can and will get better that we can continue to live on. And I think that's kind of the very message I'm left with at the end of the film.
Yeah.
Everything sucks, but it's through our consistent, because like the guy who embraced nihilism got blown up by a fucking drone. I mean,
Oh yeah, you're talking about in this movie.
he
Yeah.
dies horribly.
I mean, the guy who embraced nihilism in real life, Nikola Tesla,
Friedrich Nietzsche.
Oh my god, I've been so racked today with like hearing like I was about to call him Nikola Tesla, Friedrich Nietzsche, the guy who embraced nihilism in real life, Friedrich Nietzsche. What happened to him? He was in an asylum and he went crazy and
I mean, yeah, it's like you can't accept that like everything is just going to be bad. Even if things, and I mean, I think that's the real strength of the movie, because the movie does have a rather deft hand at examining like the things that it thinks are making the world bad, which is too much focus on work, too much focus on the individual, too much focus on possessions, and how we don't share, how we are not really connecting to each other on a deeper human level. But it's so satisfying in acknowledging that that the film acknowledges that, but you can still do that. You can still connect on a deeper level. Just have to make the effort to do it.
Yeah. It's amazing because everything you're saying right now is literally what I would say about the song "You Get What You Give" by the New Radicals. That's I once tweeted, when the revolution happens, if it's televised, it'll be soundtracked by "You Get What You Give," and that's further testament to that. So if I don't get
it
copyright strikes, I'm gonna put that song over the end of this this whole podcast.
I keep thinking about one of my favorite directors is PTA, Paul Thomas Anderson, and I keep thinking about his every. I was listening to this podcast called Increment Vice, and the guy keeps repeating, "It's all about love, baby." I mean, and you know what? It's all about love, baby.
But I don't know any movie that I love, any movie that's like truly cherished by people that is not about love in some way. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because what use of a piece of art would we have if it did not connect with the emotion that we cherish the most?
Yeah, I don't know. It's just it feels like it feels so sugary
Yeah.
at the end, and but not sugary in a bad way. It's just like these characters really can believe that the world after the invasion is going to get better, and they can really believe that they're gonna connect with each other and keep going and be able to survive whatever's gonna come at them.
Which is amazing because we're into a pandemic, and I'm not sure if we can even
I know.
booster shots. So the fact that this
Everything feels like shit, man.
movie, and no, the fact that this movie gives me that sense of optimism, it's pretty amazing considering the state of the world that we're in right now. But that's the power of film,
Yep.
and that's love, baby. And
It's all about love, baby.
yeah, and that's the exact note I would love to wrap this episode on. So, Steven, why don't you tell the people where they can find you on social media?
um, well, you can find me on Twitter at STRONICEK. Um, that there you can find links to my website where I have like kind of a demonstration of my portfolio, some of the short films that I've made, just kind of just the um, general spiel. I think it's an act of radical faith to believe that you're gonna make it as a filmmaker, you're gonna make it as a screenwriter and all that stuff. And the thing is, I just love it. I just there's no other way. It's all about love, baby. I can't stop doing it. So I just have to keep doing it. That's kind of it.
That's beautiful. Yeah, I mean, I like to tell people if I could be anything other than a storyteller, I would be, but I can't. Um,
Yeah,
so I
yeah.
am, and
I'd
I don't
certainly
know.
be making more money.
I'd be making more money. I'd be having, I'd be sleeping better. Let's put it that way. I wouldn't be going
Right,
to bed wondering like, will this exec get back to me? Like,
right.
will the typo on page 54 be a deal breaker? No, I mean, but whatever profession you are in, whatever emotions you're going through right now, I think Before We Vanish has something for everyone. So please check it out. I saw it on Amazon Prime, but it is available on VOD platforms across the board. So just
it's
go check it out.
it's very cheap to rent. It's only like $2. It's one of those that like the distributor doesn't seem to care that much about. So you can rent it very cheaply.
Well, you will, let me say this. If you want hipster points, check out this movie. So you can recommend it to people and they will say, "What's that?" And you will be the cool kid in the room.
Right. You can just tell them it's all about love, baby. I was gonna keep hammering that one.
Now I'm sure it'll be on the Criterion collection in like 20, 25 years. So just give
Um,
it.
There's a really it's not available in the United States. There's a beautiful Arrow video Blu-ray that they have in England for
Oh,
this.
okay. Well, that means it's
Um,
destined to come over here to Criterion.
yeah, I'm just looking forward. I'm looking forward to see if they get that Arrow video over to here, because Arrow did great work on Kurosawa's film Pulse, and has done great work on a lot of his on some of his other work. And I hope it gets over here. I would like a copy of it.
Yes, yes. I mean, add that to the short list of movies I would love a really great Blu-ray release of. Um, yeah. Until then, guys. First, let's thank Stephen for joining and bringing this really amazing movie to all of us. I mean, I feel like I discovered something really, really both unique and something that resonated with me in a personal way. And that's just a blessing in my eyes. So thanks again, Stephen, for joining the program. And I'm sure you will be back to talk about more films.
I thank you so much for having me. I just love talking about movies. I just love talking about, you know, just these great stories, and I'm just happy to have a platform to do it on.
Well, it's all about love, baby. That's
Yeah. Yep, it certainly is. It
All right.
certainly is.
And with that, that is All Nighter Discussions signing out.